Thank you so much for being here. How are
Awesome.
you?
I'm good. It's my pleasure. Excited to be here with you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fantastic. This is the last evening of our festival this year, and this is such a fantastic film to wrap it up with. And of course, like, I really wanted you to be a part of this, as I know you've been working in the Caribbean film industry for a long time, and you're kind of one of these staples. And I always like I was just telling my friends as well. I was like, I'm always running into him, like
Yeah.
when we were at South by Southwest, and there you were. And when, like in these different at Nadia Huggins photography exhibition. And
In
so
London.
I'm so happy to see you again, and to just kind of catch up and to talk about this work and whatever else is going on with you right
Yeah.
now.
Awesome. No, but it's true. We really do run into each other all around the world. I'm always like, oh my God, look.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
and then there was something, what was it? In February, when everybody was posting their, oh, we're so sad that we can't go to Trinidad Carnival, but all their stuff from last year. And I was looking at somebody's stories, and there you were in the background. I was like, Michael again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you're in Trinidad now?
Yeah, I'm in Trinidad right now. I was in London, and I think I'm really trying to build my life where I live between London and Trinidad, or just England and Trinidad. And I came for Carnival, and then it was kind of like, maybe I should see what's going on with Corona, and I've been in Trinidad since. So that
Yeah.
was in 2020, so I've been here a little while now, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have ended up
Yeah,
just
it's not bad.
yeah,
Get to see
no.
my parents because I didn't see them for a little while and all that. So, and then maybe it's like a reset. So you get to reset everything.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
don't have to pay rent in London. So.
There you go. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, one of the things we are enjoying about the festival having to be virtual is that we get to connect with people who wouldn't be physically in. And, we've been really like happily surprised at the connections and the relationships that we've been building. So we're happy that you could be a part of that as well.
Yeah, awesome. I
Um,
was looking through. You all made some nice kind of ventures and interesting people and different
yeah,
things. It's amazing.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, we're building a little family. We're proud of it.
I think it's good. It's
Um,
good. It's dope.
so Green Days.
Yeah.
So, like, I was so excited when I saw this film because, of course, I went to school in St. Vincent, so I know about Green Days by the River. I remember being 14 and reading that scene. What in the book is under a mango tree?
It's cashew tree.
A cashew tree, yes. And being like, whoa, because you're young, you're like that age as well. And I wanted to ask a little bit specifically about the book and how
Mhm.
important it is in Caribbean culture. Like, why do you think this story is such a strong part of why is this book included in CXC curriculum even to today?
Yeah, I think, I think that this book is in the actual fabric of, like the Caribbean, and it was published in like I know it's set in 1952, but I think it was first published in 1967 or somewhere around there. Because when we released the film, it was actually the 50th anniversary of the book, right? And that was 2017. Um, but I just think like Michael Anthony, who's the author, wrote it kind of semi-autobiographical. Like I would ask him things because in the film we end up using a mango tree, but he would express to me like I had to call him up because I couldn't get a good cashew tree and it was turning into a whole thing. And he was like, you know what, Michael, the tree was just the tree outside my home in Mayaro. So I was like, okay, it's okay if I switched to a mango tree. And he was like, but I think because it was his kind of almost semi autobiographical and this in a sense into experience is that book for us that everybody read while going to school, so, and it been on the CXE syllabus. And one of the key things too when talking to him, he was telling us that the book had sold over 800,000 copies so like I don't know if anybody track it or if we have Caribbean bestseller list, but that must be like, so it's one of those things that every generationally everybody has read and the name people know about. So it's definitely a super interesting. But I think it's like it just represents that fabric of what life was like in 1952, and it's part of it has documented that period, and it's part of our history, and that's why it's so important.
Did you feel a lot of pressure or expectation doing a film adaptation?
I did. Is first of all, it was I thought it would be a simple movie to make, and then when you really dive deep into it, the storyline might be fairly simple, but if you think about the themes, they are quite complex. So you have to really digest that and put it back out there. But I remember like a few people told me, if you mess this movie up, that's like the end of your career and different things like that. So it had an element of pressure. And then two, we had so much sponsors attached, so much promises that we made to people that it became like an entire thing. It like at some point it wasn't like making a movie, it was like pulling off a movie because of how much was going into it. So it really like I think we thought we were making a smaller film where when you really look at it, it was a big movie, and we
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of budget. Yeah,
Yeah, and like you said, it would have been really highly anticipated. It was, and um, I don't know.
yeah. All the first screenings and all that was sold out in Trinidad. It was like huge, huge event. We sold out the whole of Napa, which is a huge auditorium,
Yeah,
and yeah, it was big.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So how did you come about being the one that made this film?
Well, luckily, I didn't have to get hired to make it. As in, I've been in that space where like a lot of the opportunities for filmmaking I've had to kind of create for myself. So what ended up happening was Christian James, who's the producer of the film, he had just finished his master's in producing. And I was at that point where I'd done enough short films and documentaries where I really wanted to make like a feature length. That was my next kind of step. And I ran into him in Trinidad because they had a launch for the UE film program. They were launching a new building and he got invited to it. And I got invited because we both did our bachelor arts of film in UE. And he was there. I was like, what are you doing in Trinidad? He's like, I just graduated. And I was like, oh, let's do lunch like next week or something like that. But to make a long story short, while I was doing a film called The Cool Boys,
Mhm.
the writer, which is Dawn Cumberbatch, had sent me Green Days by the River script. And I was more in kind of like a way more rebellious space. And because I read it and I was like, so I actually read the script before I read the book, if I'm being honest. I
Okay,
read the script first. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I'm in that zone, right? And then
okay,
5 years removed from that, when me and Christian were looking for projects, it kind of came back up. And I was just like, I have something that like I remember, and I went through my emails, found it, and sent it, and then we started to discuss it, and then we had to go through that process. So it's like kind of like weird how things work and timing, but that's kind of how it really came about. But then once I read the script again and then read the book, I was like, it fit more into the themes I've been dealing with and the stories, and I thought it would be pretty easy to film, which I was wrong about. I was like, yeah, we just go in the bush and film this.
that's always what you think at the beginning of a project, and sometimes it's good. Like the Q&A that we had last night was with Alain Bidard, who's a Martinican animator, and he's made this the first ever Martinique, first ever Caribbean feature animation film. And
I've
it's
seen
a,
it, yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic film. And we were chatting last night, and he was like, it's a process, and and we had a little laugh because I was like, yeah, sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you wonder like, if I had known, would I have gotten my stuff?
Exactly,
But
because
then
it's
it's worth it when
naivety.
you come to the other side, right?
It's always worth it when it happens because you're like, oh wow. But there's a moment where like you are mentally, physically, financially, spiritually at bandwidth. And I think that's the challenge. And I mean, when you get over it, maybe it expands like your ability to do these things. But in that moment, there's that moment where, because you reach a point in all these projects where it's like success and failure are on the same line. So because you could film the movie and get to a point where you can't do post production for finances, or because when we finished filming, we didn't have money to do post, and I think we had like 10,000 left over, and we bought an iMac, and that's how me and Christian became the editors of the film. Because at that point, it was like, do we go and look for money? And we just wanted to keep moving the process forward. So we were like, let's start editing the movie while we raise funds for post production. So it was like happening. Instead of like 3 months passed, we finished filming. Is that
Yeah,
like I knew like we could never stop. I remember just
yeah,
wanting to keep filming, keep doing, because the day we stop is like it's not gonna happen. We're just gonna be like, oh, it's too much.
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, that's a good segue into the next. 'Cause I want to talk a little bit about the vision that you created here, because obviously there's a lot of different directions that you could have gone in, and you've got a very particular style. The composition of the images is very particular. There's a lot of like headroom in a lot of the landscape shots that you've created. the color palette is is very kind of muted, which I really love. I love that quality of the image that you created.
It's not too saturated.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I wanted to ask a little bit about your choices behind, why you made some of these choices.
So, well, I'll first mention the director of photography is Gil Andressa Cor from Brazil, and she lives in LA. And we had like a list of names, and me and her ended up doing like a Zoom call, and kind of was like, oh, I was settled that I wanted her to be the DP. And then I had done like maybe about 3 or 4 shot lists, and then when she came into the process, we sat down and really watched a few movies together. Like we watched In the Mood for Love, we watched Mother of George, and I was really expressing to her like the kind of style I would want. And we kind of really, I was telling her I didn't want to go like a Hollywood language. I want to try and create like what a Caribbean film language might look like. So really, that was the goal now. So it wasn't trying to be like close up, wide,
Right,
medium shots and do very formula filmmaking. So very much it was like that type of process. And a few things helped us. One, like to do a lot of coverage, you also need a lot of budget because that means shooting like, more setups and spending more time on scenes. So we really tried to design the film in a way where we can move a little faster to try to get scenes. So we didn't do all the coverage and really try to be real specific on where we wanted to film. And then little things like happen, like I remember showing it had this little clip with the movie Drive, and it was talking about the rule of thirds, and it was showing you in the clip how the way the actor moves in the lower third portions, and we were watching it like a couple times. And when we went to do like that walking scene in the landscape, she was like, "Remember how you were showing me in Drive? Like, look, we could do it here." And it was just things like ideas like that, and us just
yeah,
being real unapologetic, and her being down for some of the crazy stuff. I'm like, nah, let's shoot it like this. So we
yeah,
really just, it was that kind of vibe. That's a nice thing to me about independent film. Like we could be authentically our voices.
right,
Like nobody had final cut on this film besides me and Christian, just saying like, so we could have done what we wanted. So that's why some
yeah,
scenes, and I remember sometimes the first AD would be like, you don't want to get a close up? I'd be like, because we like shoot one of the
yeah,
main scenes with Gadari and Shell. It's just like a dolly across and he having this conversation. And I was like, no, that's it. We have it.
yeah,
Because I knew like if I went and shoot the close ups and all that, we'd have probably use it.
yeah,
So it's like
yeah,
nice just because you just naturally, that's what happens when you're editing, you use what you shoot. So like I was like,
exactly.
no, that's it, we have it, let's move on.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so we definitely wanted to build this movie, kind of like being an architect of a building and really trying to figure out how and the way it should move and work. And it's really just about being independent. If anything, I feel like now when I look at it, it's still playing the cinema language a little safe. Like at that point in time when I was doing it, I was like, who is it gonna work? And I feel like, are we breaking the language a little bit? Because people have told me, what the dangerous thing about not being like a Hollywood film language and being more of an independent language is people so accustomed to Hollywood that you could lose the audience that accustomed watching that. Because this is a different pace film. And I wanted the pace to feel like the speed of life in 1952 Trinidad and Tobago. So
Hmm.
really and truly, I think it's like a film that we were making that stands on its own.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you're saying about, especially as we have this emergent Caribbean film industry, and we're trying to like basically make these films almost like marketable and accessible globally. And because Hollywood is the dominant kind of language, there's a lot of kind of negotiation. Like, how do we formulate a language that's authentically ours, but also make it marketable and this kind of stuff. But I do think that more and more, like, more and more I'm seeing these kinds of compositions that your film uses. More and more it's becoming more normal to kind of break up the language in these kinds of ways. So like you're saying, I think it definitely does that. And I think also there's a certain amount of respect that we owe our audiences, because we can, you do have to think about it, and sometimes you do want to just be safe, right? Because
Yeah.
you're putting a lot into this. You don't want people to be like, oh, walk house or whatever. But at the same time, if the storytelling is good, then you can get away with some stuff.
I think
And I think I think it's important as a region for us to safeguard our language as well and do things differently and take risks.
Well, I think that's what people might be interested in. You don't want to come to Trinidad to see Hollywood. Well, you want to come to Trinidad. To me, in my brain, is like, oh wow, what are they doing over there? Let's go check this out, and it offers something different. So I see the uniqueness, like what might make people interested in what we have going on is the difference. So obviously it's kind of similar, it's still film and all that, but the difference is like you're discovering something new. So in my mind, that's how it like should work, and that's what I strive to do. And it's more fun that way. But film is so interesting because I always say like, if right now I had to edit Green Days, I might like edit it totally different just from the perspective of like if I watch any movie now, I'm like, oh man, that Coco dance scene is just way too long. And when I was editing it, I was so in love with that footage. I was like, I don't care if there's a 5-minute scene at staying, everybody just had to sit down and watch it.
Yeah.
And now even I'm like, ooh, it's kind of long, boy.
I
So just
know. Oh
like
my
where you at,
God.
Huh?
I know that feeling all too well when you watch back something and you're like, like I really could have just 5 seconds shorter or 5 seconds longer. And I know that feeling all too well. But when you're close to your work, you're
Yeah.
hypersensitive to it. And I think, because I was gonna ask you as well about the editing and about the fact that like you use a lot of times it's one shot and it doesn't feel like, because some films you feel like, oh, this was shot because like this because it was low budget and they were trying to just move along, they didn't have time to do all the different shots. But this didn't feel like that. It felt like it was an intentional part of the
It
film
was.
language to have those long takes, and it worked really nicely.
Yeah. We definitely use the long take. And you know what else it was though? Okay, so if you remember, if you revisit the book, there is a lot of internal dialogue happening within the book, this internal monologue. And I didn't want to make a voiceover film where constantly we showing the actor and it's like that internal monologue playing out. The device we try to use is like the camera following behind him or staying on his face, kind of representing that like he is the protagonist and this story is his story. So that means we don't always need to cut to the other actors. We don't always need to show the reverses
Exactly.
because what's important is his performance and it being his story. And that was
Yeah.
part of the way we tried to deal with that. But I mean, with the exception of a few little coverage things, but that was very much our style that we were kind of really going for. And that's what I meant now. Like I had to be confident in directing that was gonna work because
Yeah.
it didn't have no coming back after to be like, oh, you know what, we really should have done more coverage. It was like being comfortable that this is how we designed it, we're gonna shoot the film. And after a few days of filming and watching dailies and all that, I was like, no, this is it, we have it, and this is how we're gonna edit the film. And so and that's kind of probably why on some level I was encouraged to be like, let's not get an editor. Because I felt like an editor would have, I mean, obviously I would have, final say, but I felt like an editor now would have come and disjoint a lot of that we did.
Mm. Yeah. Potentially. Yeah. Um. Tell me about the color.
The color. So now we got the camera for Panavision in LA, right? So the Arri Alexa. So they sent it to Trinidad, and but the thing about it was after using that type of camera and shooting all, which has a lot of dynamic range, and shooting a lot for day for night and all these different things, we quickly realized, okay, we need to get a good color in house. And we were just contacting a few different places, and luckily we contacted a place, Technicolor, which is like does a lot of Hollywood productions. And I just reached out to them on a whim, and they would like, we have this week free. If you all want, you could come in for this price and use it Monday to Friday. And they would give us the colorist and all that. So we were like, oh, for sure. So we flew to LA. I flew to LA, and the DP came as well. And me and her were discussing the coloring from before. But you know what was interesting was I got so accustomed in the editing to Rec 709. That was like a lot we put on it, which is a very saturated look actually. And I got real accustomed to it because I was editing the whole movie in Rec 709. And if we had to play anything for anybody, we were using that. And I was just like so accustomed to the saturated look that when we went in, well, a couple of things happened too. Editing in Technicolor Studios is like editing in a cinema. So like I didn't really realize this, but real different things happen to your eyes when you stay in a dark room and look at like a cinema screen for a whole day. Because like I would find something like super bright, walk outside, come back in, find it looking dull, the same exact image. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of different things happening. But eventually we got this kind of like in fact, I'm not even gonna lie, the DP and the colorist had to sit me down and be like, it will look more cinematic with less saturation. And we started this kind of conversation, and eventually they were right. And then once I bought in, I was like, cool, let's. And then we just kind of did the whole. And so I learned actually from them that kind of how to, and I take the advice, and that is literally how that palette really kind of got that nice muted, and it worked perfectly after, and it looks good. Like I've seen it play on so many things, and in a weird way, in this kind of like less saturation, it actually is brighter. I don't know how to describe that. It becomes bright.
I
Like the
think I know
razor
what
bush
you
is
mean.
bright. It's
I think
bright.
I know what you mean. And I mean, for me as well, I mean, obviously because I know it's set in 1952 and I know it was a book that was written in the 60s. So I was also like, there's something about the color that kind of lends itself to that, to this kind of time, that it's this sort of like time, a piece from this time frame or like a historical story, And I think combined with the composition and also the music, which I want to talk about as well.
Yeah. But that was definitely one of the notes. I said like what we can't do in story or budget, we need to do in the coloring, we need to do in the sound design, we need to finish the idea of 1952 in those places. So definitely a lot of thought and effort and team going in to try to figure out all those things, how we could make the rest of the film. So like I like no director I think really knows it all. So you have a lot of expertise around you, and then everybody tries to help get your vision to the across the finish line, and that's definitely part of that process now. A lot of so from the producer to the DP to colorist, but a lot of meals in the film in terms of like, because what I realized when you edit your own film, like you finishing those ideas that you shot, right? So it gets really interesting because, but all on the next project,
Yeah.
hopefully I'll have an editor, but
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process, right? Because sometimes you're so close to the material that it can be helpful to have an outside eye, somebody who hasn't seen it. Like, I know a lot of directors, like, they have different relationships with their editors, but sometimes they'll, like some directors are like, my editor cannot be on set. They can't have any relationship to how this footage was produced. They need to come in totally clean. Other directors might be like, yeah, come on set, So, and then it depends on each project as well.
yeah, it's
Um,
very
but I think like, what about the music?
yeah. I mean, music was we went through a lot of different. Kind of started off in a place where we had a lot of guide tracks on there, and I remember I had like the song Peanut Vendor, Peanut, and it was like, and we had edited the whole dance sequence, so Dan fell in love with it, and then couldn't get the rights to the music.
Yeah.
Right, so things like that would happen, or we would have this piece of clip, so we want to use, or things, I was trying to stay true to the period. In the end, it turns out like a lot of it we were running risk. You don't want your film to get locked up into we can't get permission for something, and it get
Yeah.
so because you could get like half the permission, like maybe the master, but not the it's two permissions you need to get, right? So in the end, we had a lady by the name of Laura Kapman in LA score the film. So it's a lot of that jazz and all that coming from there is her. Then we, for certain scenes, like we would handpick, like I knew I wanted Freetown Collective to do that Coco dance scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, went by Muhammad and showed him the footage, and he was like, yo, I love it. And we actually wrote something and gave him guide music, and he messaged me and was just like,
Yeah, it works
I don't
beautifully.
want to, huh?
It works beautifully in that scene. Yeah.
He was like, I don't want to use your guide music. Can I do my own thing? And I was like, go for it. And that is what he did, which was way better than what we had for him. So it was that process. And then I know me and Christian listened to so much music, and he had a playlist too, because we were both editing it together. And I think he found some of that, it was French calypso, and we put it in and it worked. So we went and got the rights to that. And so from so many different sources, we started to build the soundtrack of the film and put it in there. And, and then when we gave it to Laura to score the film, we left in the guide music. So a lot of it she made better, but she used that guide music and kind of was like redid the drums, redid this,
Yeah.
but left in, some of those things. So it was like a process to get the song finalized, but from all over, just pulling. And then we had one Calypsonian, a local one. He passed away. I trying to remember his name. But he have two songs in it. Like when they were at the bar, his music was playing on the radio, and I think one other part of the film. So it's just a process of finding things that work, and we try to stay true to 1952. So all of it, and so it have no electronic instruments in there. or anything like
Right,
that.
right, right. No,
Same
and
thing
I
with like
really, go ahead.
same thing with like not using Steadicam and those kind of things, or drone or anything like that. We stuck to like what would be available in 1950, which is dollies, tripods, just
That's really interesting. So you chose to sort of almost like limit yourself in terms of
yeah,
what
yeah. We didn't have no
technology.
Steadicam. All of that is dolly shots. Like every setup is like tripod and dolly. We stuck to it. We didn't go to, and same thing with the music. We didn't have no electronic instruments and all of that.
Right, right. I think no, I mean in terms of the music, it really like suits the film. You know, sometimes you see you experience music on a film and it feels dissonant in a certain way, not on purpose. You know, I felt like there was something really organic about the
Mm.
music, and it really suited the landscape. It kind of had this like this fresh like lifeness to it. I don't know how I'm not explaining
Well,
it well, but
no, 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 you're right. And I wanted the landscape to be a theme in the movie, like from start. I was like, the landscape is a character, the land is a character. So it's all of that kind of coming together. We really put a lot of our soul into this film. It wasn't really about money because we was always in debt making this movie. So it was really just like we were trying to make that best product we could possibly make at all
yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the themes in the film and like obviously like Green Days by the River, it's like a coming of age story and about kind of, a young man sort of discovering his sexuality, right? And then that's in, the symbolism in them trying to get down the fruit and all of these things. Like, did you have to tap into any of your personal adolescent for inspiration?
I do think on some level, like that experience. I have been through those things but in different ways. Like for him is leaving Miaro, whether he going to Port of Spain or Joan wanting to go to England to study or something like that. But for me, it's no different like leaving Trinidad, wanting to leave Trinidad, wanting to leave my space for more opportunity. So you
Yeah,
definitely have to find places where you connect to that story to understand it, because I think that's what directing is. You need to understand. So obviously it's things that you do directly, but you find in your own way where you can identify with the character, and I have had those experiences where like, look, what film director in Trinidad do I really look to? So for all I want, I love the Caribbean, but at the same time, that's why you run into me in London or South by West. So is that searching and trying to get out and find something. You don't want to lose your Caribbeanness, but it's like you're trying to build a bridge, but you don't know
mm-hmm.
how. And I think within that character is no different. He at that age where it's like interested in girls, or how you're gonna make money, what opportunities lie in Miaru. And even his father didn't want him to go and plant the land and work in the cocoa estate because it was like that's how he ended up in that position, is what kind of life you're gonna have. So definitely connected in a lot of those different ways. And then naturally growing up, dating different girls, you have your experiences. Luckily for us, we in different times, but back then it shows you kind of if you slept with a girl, what could happen. Eventually you could be forced to
Yeah,
marry her. And the book itself leaves because you're not sure if she's pregnant because it have that conversation around
yeah,
in it. You're not really sure, and you're not really sure if it's because people have come up to me and had all kind of ideas. It's like, I figure it out. It's not Shell. She really was with the other guy. And like all kind of dramatic. And I just be like, well, I wasn't trying to do that. But, maybe, I don't know, because the book is very vague in terms of all of that.
yeah. I think as well, like rewatching it as well, it kind of what really comes across as well is like, that kind of maybe happy-go-lucky thing of youth, and then you just get smacked in the face with the realities of life, the social expectations, the tragedies of death, and the story in some sense is, yeah, it's like coming of age. It's that transition, and like,
Only because you said this, I'll mention it. Like, I was really, really sad about 2 to 3 weeks ago because the guy who played Joe died in a car accident in Trinidad. That is, the friend of young Colonel Alexander is his name. And it was just so sudden. He's a DJ. He went to do it, and on his way home, he got in a car accident. He was in the back seat. But I remember I was just like feeling like, part of the Green Days family had passed. And he was such like a bright-eyed, bushy-tail actor. Like, and anytime I would have a screen or anything, I'd be like, "Hey, kid, Alexander, you could come." And he would be like, yeah, just let me know, and yeah, so, and that's the reality of life. It's sad. It's so much different things happen. And if you're not paying attention to your path, or anything, I go through that to this day, like just simple things like, I know ultimately I want to be a path to making other movies, but then you have to live. So you're doing like corporate video jobs. It's just this balance. It's always a struggle, But and I guess that's what this character going through, and that's why you could really identify with him. The interesting thing I think about the character is he doesn't make a decision for himself. So decisions are made for him. So in terms of his character arc and growth is quite interesting because he doesn't actually come to a place where he takes charge of his own life.
I'm so sorry to hear that
Yeah, I know
your
it was
friend.
sad. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, part of the family, and obviously somebody who's part of this film, which is
Yeah.
quite iconic. Like it's a really important cultural production. So I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, yeah. It's very sad. But I guess I didn't realize that. Just moving kind of on, but somebody was telling me this, like, you realize, like, in 100 years, none of us here, or whoever lucky enough to be here, um they were like, when they look back on 1952 Trinidad, Green Days might be the reference point. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even know, right? When you make something and it goes out in the world, like it takes on its own life. It's a whole other. And then you're looking at it, and the thing is looking back at you, and you're like, well, okay, here we are. And I
Yeah.
think it's really really interesting what you said about you know that thing about trying to direct your path and reaching to the point in your own life when you kind of decide to maybe not be so much like Shelley and not be so acted upon by the world, but be like, right, no, let me see what I can act upon within the world, and then also while juggling all of these real life demands. And it's, I think, something that you have to constantly negotiate, and you do want to know, you do want to be conscious and aware about where you are, because you want to in as much ways as possible, like mitigate whatever tragedy might
Mm,
be coming your way, because life is not easy, what I'm saying. So that
exactly.
awareness, I
No.
think, is really like the main tool that we have.
Yeah, I think so. It grounds us, and I'm constantly like finding myself being like, does this decision help me on my path? And if it doesn't, is the money I'm doing it for good enough to not have me on my path? Like,
Yeah,
as reality.
yeah, for sure, for sure. We've got a couple of
Yeah.
questions. um Brent Shuffler commented, nice to see how you evoke the language, the manners, the values, and even the dress of 70 years ago. There was so much of the British colonial influence, and yet the authenticity of Black and Indian cultures coexisting and meeting, and at points blending from food to relationships.
Wow, he saw a lot. And I really thought about it being under colonial times and tried to infuse some of our in the school dance and just different
Yeah,
places.
yeah, yeah. And then of course, obviously race is a theme in the film as well. It comes up, and then there's a lot in terms of race, thinking about the divisions that were happening in the society. Like, oh no, you're a down the beach person, you can't
Yeah.
climb an orange tree. Like, black people don't like this, Indian people are like that. Like mixed people are like this. So all of that as well is embedded in the film, and in some ways, well, these things do still exist today.
Yeah. For sure. And we really didn't try to take like a side with it, but rather represent exactly how the book presented it. Because I didn't want, so I just tried to replicate that. But it definitely is a conversation. And when we played the film, I remember being in screenings all across the world, and people would ask, but I had a discussion with Michael Anthony, and he told me, no, that's how it was. People were just living together in Miaro at that point in time, and it didn't have any real kind of conflict. But then when you dive into it, you realize like Mr. Gadari had to seen something in Shell to want him to marry his daughter. Ultimately, that's his daughter. And I think to me, I think it is he saw somebody who could work the land. And that was the most important thing for him. So race didn't matter, any of that didn't matter. And that kind of draws into like a next theme that I think is so important because in directing this, you really have to become a psychologist. Because I remember at a point in time in rehearsing the dog attack scene with Mr. Gadari and all that, I was even thinking, oh, he doing this out of like spite for sleeping with my daughter or this or having Joan and like this revenge, right? And coming closer to film, and I realized he was doing it out of disappointment and love and control, which is two totally different ways of playing that. And that is why now when the dog attacks Shell and he gives a little speech, it's kind of like he comes to tears, is because we tap in more into the love energy of like loving somebody so much that you have to do them something to get them in line to your will and the complexity of that. So this is like kind of, and this is the thing about directing, you have to figure out all of that because, even you might know where you start from. But when I reached to that zone, I was like, that will make it more powerful because it's easy to be anger or angry or vengeful or laugh.
Right.
Like while the dog attacking him, because at the point in time, me and him was discussing him laughing and enjoying it, just exploring. And then we came to that place where we realized, because that's how I'll discuss with the actors. And we were both like, I said, I think he's doing this out of love because he's going to have Shall marry his daughter. It can't be that, he hates him.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways as well, if you think about the times, and like how things were very gendered, right? He didn't have a son as well.
Yeah.
And Shell also was losing his father. So in some ways they were kind of replacing these figures for each other. So he was putting a lot of expectation and hope and genuine, like you say, like genuine love for this boy. And then he's disappointed, but he's disappointed because the boy is a boy and he makes mistakes, but of course there are these social things in place that are creating those expectations and like, that's what expectation often like leads to disappointment.
And you started off by asking about the power of the book. And I think it is in that because imagine me just making this movie without a book, which wouldn't happen, but just saying, you would be like, why tell that story? Because it's so simple. It's not, what I mean? So the book is really the star of
Interesting.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
I think about it like that. Like if you just went and make, say next, it need the context of the book is what kind of gives it the I think the story, the value in some level.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, I mean, that's the power of these adaptations, right? Of cinematic adaptations of these books, of these iconic stories for our culture. Um, Jimon Bergen asked, what was the casting process for the film like?
Yeah.
How did you recruit your actors?
I mean, Facebook, theater groups, just anybody, friends, anybody who suggested. And then NALIS, which is the library, the National Library in Port of Spain, was one of our sponsors. So we set up casting sessions out there and they gave us one of their rooms and we'd have people come in. But I really didn't look for people who looked the part, but because I try to tell people, like, I don't know, but for me as a director, I can't make a bad actor good. So I need to cast somebody who could act, right? So really and truly, I went for people who I thought could have delivered the performances. Because when we did the Gadari casting call, we told people come in like the boots and the hat and what they thought the character would look like. So people come with cutlass and this. Oh, it was to see like 30 people just dressed in it already. It was amazing, right? And Mr. Gadari, who came, which is Anand Laukaran, actually might have looked the least. It had some real men who come. You could see the buff men, all kind of different versions. But in his performance, I can remember to this day, when he had never read the book, but he came in saying he grew up in Rio Claro and he know about the land. And while he was discussing, he's like, I love this land. And he held his hat. And I was like, yeah, that is it. This man understand his character without even reading the book and all that, because he grew up like understanding what the value of the land is. And Israeli comes down to typecasting. And the same thing with Sudai, who played Shell. He, it came down to two characters, but I thought two young men, but I thought one was a little more less shy and more of a star boy. So I was like, that'll work with the character. And that's how Sudai, because naturally he was a little more shy. And I felt like we could probably raise him up to be a little less, but it harder to, if somebody overly confident, to bring them down. Literally, Rosalie happened like 2 weeks before, maybe even the week before. Christian, the producer, was flying to Tobago. He's taking his wife. and she was on the plane. And I just remember her messaged me like, yo, I found Rosalie. She on the plane with me. This is her number. And like the next week, we did a casting with her and she got the part.
She hadn't acted in anything before.
No, she's actually a doctor now, you know. So
Okay.
all the adults had acted like, so Shea Rodriguez, he had acted in theater and he was even in BIM. Annan had been in films, you know, all the adults, all the kids, this is their first time,
Yeah.
you know, on camera and screen, everything. So.
Um, Rory asks, what social impact do you think the book had when it came out? And do you think the film has the same impact with today's audience?
Well, part of our pitch when to get the funding was like we kind of went out there saying this film gonna change Trinidad and Tobago. So you do have these hopes and dreams that the work you're doing is impactful and powerful, and you know, for the very least, gives a kind of understanding of or it be inspiring, you know, because I just assume being informed, tree, you might never have known that this was the type of music that would be playing in Trinidad. People going to disco would be wearing a suit.
Yeah.
You know, like, so that was part of the nostalgia and just like the educational value to me. I think we were able to provide. And when it played in Trinidad, we had a huge school tour where school buses or schools would come into Movie Tongue and Caribbean cinemas and IMAX and watch the film. And so it had a very big educational part to play. So I think that, you know, I hope that we added a lot of value, you know, on the educational side of things, and then inspiring other filmmakers. And also, I just think like a lot of people connect to the story and could feel proud to see themselves on screen. And that's part of it too now. Like, you know, as a country, I think it was one thing that, you know, spaces that celebrate art really understand as like a mirror and a reflection. And even choosing this project, I wanted something that could be a family film and not necessarily some violent kind of, you know what I mean? It's like going on, I hadn't seen this on screen, and that's why I wanted to create it. So hopefully all of that, you know, ties into answering like, I think we did create something impactful, and you know, I don't know if we'll get to directly see those ripples, but I think they have been made. You know.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Do you think a lot of those teenage boys that watched the film left thinking, "Oh gosh, I better not"?
I mean, I think they had some Joan and Rosalie kind of good, but I'm a Rosalie and this and
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
slangs and you know, my Jane, because they wouldn't have that slang. You know, she's a nice Jane boy. You know, like all those kind of things. I think they enjoyed it and tapped into it. I don't know if it stayed with them, but they got the
Yeah, yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah,
Went to
yeah.
the journey.
Fantastic. I think it's important for youth to see that as well. Like, you know,
Well, what I would do is I had a thing, and to this day it still lasts. Like once you book the movie, I'm willing to show up and do whatever it is for it because I feel like it's an extension. So for all them school tours, I made myself available and I'd go and do Q&As, which took up a lot of time and all that, but I would go. Like once you booked it and you request now after a while, I kind of had to be like, but for a large amount of time I went and sometimes I'd sit down and watch a movie with them, see where they laugh and where they're not, you
yeah,
know, and experience it and then do a Q&A after and all that, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think as a filmmaker too, that's a kind of, you know, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but also like an exciting part of the process. Like see where they're laughing, see where they're not, what lands, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we all trying to be, I guess, it's kind of weird, right? Caribbean filmmakers, but then it's feeling more and more that to some extent you have to kind of leave or be back and forth. That's why, like, because I felt like to me this movie should have had a bigger reach, but we couldn't really. It was so hard for us to get beyond the Caribbean. Like we got into the Caribbean, but then like I think we used all the energy to get us into the Caribbean and
Yeah.
didn't really have international energy. So it kind of just, you know, so that's like part of like why I probably between. So like for my next film, I want to have like a producer or somebody, you know, outside, so hopefully could have some international life, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the contribution that it's had to the region is really, really important as well. And you know,
For sure.
absolutely. Um, Jamon Bergen asks, the critically endangered patois, the Trinidad French Creole, was featured in the film. What are your views on using regional Creole languages in film, considering many still have poor attitudes towards them, despite the fact that many of these dialects are still in wide use?
A pretty good question. Um, so there's a little bit of Creole in the book itself. But luckily, so the mother was played by Dara Healy and father by Shay Rodriguez. And so I, being much younger, didn't have, because in Trinidad it'd be a lot of the older generation know this language, the French Creole. But I told Shay in rehearsing and Dara that I do want to add this element, and luckily they knew certain words. So naturally, what they did was sometimes insert it. And it had points where I felt like they did it too much. So I'd be like, no, 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 let's do English here. I didn't want it to become like a dual language. But I thought it would add another layer and give some realness to it. If we, from words to here, they kind of introduce it. So, and I think it did add that layer, and it did help to
Yeah.
work to bring it into that time.
I mean, I wasn't aware they that people spoke French Creole in Trinidad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's how they actually know it, because I guess when they were kids, it was a lot more, probably around.
Prevalent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but now I think it's not necessarily. It's very rare to find somebody speaking
Find
Trin.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
So we did introduce a
Um,
little bit of it.
Vaughn notes it was a very good adaptation and asks what is next for you, Michael.
Yeah, I have like two projects right now actually. One in Trinidad and one in the UK. So I've been like kind of going hard on those. Uh, they both kind of in that kind of moving into getting funding spaces. The one in Trinidad I had to finish a rewrite, but I definitely want to make a film between this year and next year. So that is really kind of what I've been putting together. But I've been doing a lot of corporate work right now. So that's why it's that kind of, you try to, like a squirrel, I'm trying to stack something up. So when I
Yeah.
go and do this now, it's like, and that's kind of how it works. So, during Corona, I took that time out to try to reset, but also to go down the line of doing some corporate work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like I excited because we delivered this film in like 2017, and now we're in 2021. So I definitely thought I would have gotten the opportunity to make another film. But one part of the problem, and that's what I think in this region, is like you really have to like get your products, put it on your back, and now go and make this thing happen. And I was like,
Yeah.
kind of unfortunate because I would have loved for like an opportunity to come where it was finance and they're just looking for a director, and it's like,
Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. But didn't work out that way or as yet. So now we're in that process of like rebuilding everything to make another film. And I just excited because I feel like I learned so much through this process that like even just as a director, as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, financially, just all the different spaces. And what you really learn, I don't know, it's so weird. I don't know if other filmmakers feel this way, but after this film, I've just felt like, so much of filmmaking is, or in my experience, is just not like that much creativity, because when I look at the 3 years, a lot of it was fundraising, contracts, like administrative, just saying like it was a lot of that. And then we filmed the whole thing in 27 days. Then I got like 27 days of creativity,
Yeah.
and then the editing, and then it was back to like trying to figure out how we get it into
Promote,
viewers. So it's
distribution.
such an interest.
Yeah.
You have to become so multidimensional. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, you have to become an entrepreneur as a film director.
Yeah. 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 Until you get those big checks and then you
Well,
get other people to do all of that.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, we're not there yet, but yeah, 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 yeah. So I
It's
mean,
coming. It's
oh,
coming.
yeah, for me, it's trying to be between I just trying to, because I want to keep my Caribbean brand and I want to expand, and because I have a British passport, so that's why I've been like, let me really start to build on the UK side and just also connect to that side, because I've lived in the Caribbean so long. I didn't really have a big connection. My grandmother is British and my dad is born in England, but I never really spent that much time there. So I had a
Mhm.
curiosity too to go and explore some of that and see that side of my heritage, because I'm probably just super Caribbean, but now I'm like, I want to learn about this other side.
Yeah, and it's a great asset to have in terms of resource. I mean, that makes you eligible for grants or funds over here. So where
I'm
do
like,
you so where do you like when you're raising money for your movies? Like, we showed this film Cafu from Haiti, and we had a chat with the producer afterwards, who's also the writer on the film, and he said, that film was basically such a passion, just like a passion project, and they raised money. They got money from a beer company, from a hotel, and from the director's, personal funds, and they were both on set, like mopping and cleaning and doing whatever they needed to do, and so where do you go about when you're sort of looking for funding for your project?
Yeah. I mean, Green Days, we looked everywhere. We probably did like 2,000 meetings in Trinidad. But like, you know what realized that was kind of amazing, like how simple life is. Because the title of the film was Green Days by the River, and we got the big companies in Trinidad that all were, their company color was green. Like, it's so funny. B-Mobile, green is their color, and they were our title sponsor. First Citizens Bank, green is the color, and they were like one of our sponsors. And we got BPTT, British Petroleum
Right.
Gas, right? And they were also green. So it's kind of interesting how like some of that just and we got and look opticians, their color was green as well. So it's kind of
Right.
interesting how simple things like that just naturally played in, and people kind of just was like, oh wow, let's support this.
Yeah.
um, we got private funding. It have some of my family funds in there.
Yeah.
So friends and family just scraped from everywhere. We got gap financing from a bank in Trinidad. So we actually took a loan out. And that was a whole next ordeal. And I had rebate financing and a lot of different things happened with that. So that's why I said we really extended ourselves, like overextended financially too. And, where we could save, we tried to save. But yeah, me and Christian got up. It had an issue on set with like for one of the sets where it had like a heap of rubbish. I'll just be honest, like, and the first aid he talked to us about it and all that, and we were like, and she was like, no, well let's take a day off, but we didn't want to take a day off, and we were like, don't worry about it, that heap of rubbish will be cleared by tomorrow. We went home, sleep, got up 2 a.m., me and the producer, and drove, and this is like a 3 hour away, sat in the bush. He was like, go to sleep as I go home. Go and sleep. He got up 3 a.m., he picked me up. We drove down there with shovels, cleaning, da 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 da. And me and him at 3 a.m. were like shoveling all of this. And then we got the art department to bring a truckload of gravel and they covered it. And we put boards on top of it. Like, so we use some of the resources and all that. And then when the crew was arriving for like breakfast to set up and all that at like 5 a.m., we were there bareback, like just had finished cleaning out this heap of rubbish. I think it helps too, because your crew kind of like, oh wow, they're willing to do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you get into this zone where you don't really care. It's like what needs to be done at some point is like, let's just do it now, like wherever it is. Like I think we would have tried anything. They're like, this need a new roof. I'd be like, buy the galvanized, get the hammer and the nails, and we'd just be like, I think this is how it's done. And literally, it just gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you cross the point of no return, right? You're like, well, we've come so far, so if we don't just give it 200% right now, then why are we even here?
Yes, anything. Like I didn't need to film at that house. That house had great problems. It didn't have a floor or a roof. That's why I probably even mentioned that. And we had to figure out how to put in a floor, make it safe, put in a roof so we could film. And that was the only old cocoa house I could find that had like grass around it and like I was on a hill.
Yeah.
I wasn't like in between other houses. I was like, and that caused a lot of problems because now we had to find money to fix this house.
Yeah. 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 I got another question from Rory. Do you feel like there are elements of Trinidadian life that need to be addressed more on screen?
I mean, I feel like none of our stories have been told.
Mm.
It's the Wild West in the Caribbean right now. The Caribbean just full. Like you think of any story that like America or any other part of the world might have 100 stories on. We barely have one on it. So like nothing is cliched to me. It's like all those stories still need to be explored now. So like we should have a booming industry. We should be valuing the arts. And I got to that place where I used to have a little moment in time like 10 years ago, or I don't even know when, where I would be like, oh, I want to make everything, or that real small mindset. And now I'm in that place where like anybody want information, I'm like, yo, this way how to do, go do that, this way how to call, like, because now I see the value in like, this kind of movement that everybody trying to do. Yeah, it's like a total shift and trying to help and understanding, because I started to realize like when we went to all our meetings, we were saying, we're going to do what Bazidi did. Because Bazidi had a big premiere in Trinidad. And we were like, yeah, see that film? Like I was going to be bigger than that. Like, and if it didn't have a Bazidi for us to say that, like, then I see how it works. So now somebody could be like, yo, this film, like, is like Bazidi, Green Days, da 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 da. We could, because as people get more familiar, it draws that connection now. And that's why it's important to have good films and successful films and films that get made, because every time a bad one gets made, and don't get me wrong, filmmakers need the opportunity to make bad movies as well. because I would directly say if I didn't make Cool Boys, which I do think came out amazing, I made a lot of mistakes on that film, that I would not have been able, because I learned from the mistakes I made there to go and make Green Day. So it's like, this is a process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, what do you think in terms of where our industry is going? Do you feel like organically it's kind of moving in a direction where it's expanding, or what do you think are the challenges that we're facing as a region?
I think it is expanding. I think we just have brutally bad funding problems. Because when you look at like from a BFI or what's going on in France or Toronto and America, like they have so much funding for the filmmakers. Like they actually understand that independent cinema, it might not be a financial thing, but it might be a cultural value thing or expression thing, you know? I don't think we really understand that. And just in kind of tying back, one of the key things we did when we went for funding is I never once told anybody this was a good investment. You know, even the people who are friends and family, I said, listen, if you want 10% back on your money, because the contract has that, but I'm like, this is not the sale. This is like, if this is your last set of money, do not put it in this. If you really expecting to get back at 10%, this is not the investment for you. At big and bold to the bottom where you sign, it says like, you know, you could lose your money. Like we're just being real about this, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really about finding investors that are starting back in that want to invest in the cultural value. And I'm saying, to me, that's what the audience need to really understand in terms of being filmmakers in the region is like these products, whether they make money or not, it actually don't matter. But the problem is in pitching them that it's going to make money. It kind of is a kind of thing now, because when people do get back their money now, they kind of might not put into a different project because of the
Yeah.
expectation you set. But I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe it's not about making films anymore because of TikTok and YouTube, and we kind of like me, you, we went to like Caribbean Tales Incubator, and like I think we locked into being filmmakers because I don't think in those short formats. Like I don't think in TikTok, and I don't like thinking I want to have a YouTube channel. All I think is like, yo, that's a great film idea. I want to make this film.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe it's happening in a different way, where is Facebook now and they're releasing their short 1 minute or 2 minute films on what they did for the day or jokes and comedy. So maybe, and because cell phones and cameras becoming more accessible, maybe it's like a whole different wave coming that we just not identifying because we locked into like being purists as this film.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
sometimes I even be like, yo, how everybody calling themselves filmmakers? Or,
Yeah, well, I mean, on TikTok as well, it's very filmic. Like
yeah.
I don't have a TikTok. I don't TikTok, but on when you see people on the stories on Instagram, they put stuff up, and you can see like you're like, oh, they're using music here, they're using
Yeah.
editing, they're using sound effects. Like this is filmmaking, like and they're doing storytelling. So it's in some ways, like I like that, like the process of storytelling is becoming so accessible, and democratic, and like whoever can just go on there and be creative. Like I think that that's great.
Serious, I think serious democracy, but then it's interesting. I think tied is double-edged. So it's tied with that democracy. You could see companies who could get control of it. But so I just think maybe it's happening, but in like a different way. Because it is harder to make the long form stuff here. But I don't know, with the technology, I just feel like it should have more long form coming out,
Yeah, yeah. We have another question here. Brent Shuffler asks, what opportunities are you finding through cinemas in Trinidad and elsewhere? For example, in Barbados, the biggest Cineplex makes a point of featuring local films at the same price points as the foreign feature films.
Yeah, that is definitely an interesting conversation. I mean, our film played in Barbados. Our film played in all the major cinemas in Trinidad and Tobago, and it did play for the same exact price as a Hollywood movie. I don't know. That's the price of. I mean, traditionally, because the exhibitors traditionally they don't want to change their business model, right? Is a real kind of that business model just being the same way for the last. It is what it is. So I
Yeah,
don't even know who to blame in that kind of, because as from their perspective, it's like we are the exhibitors. We don't market. We what we do is play a movie for 2 weeks, and if it's doing good, add on a third week, a fourth week, a month, and as it keeps doing well. Is so, I think their perspective is largely like we are exhibitors and distributors come to us. And
Yeah.
whether it's a local film or not, they just look at it like they're just treating you like a distributor. You came to distribute your film. So I think from their lens, that is their argument. And from our lens, I think definitely for us as filmmakers is 100% kind of like we can't compete because if a big Hollywood movie was to come out the same week as your film, a local film, everybody would go see that, right? So it have a lot to do with timing. And but then maybe if your ticket was cheaper, is a complicated one because then even the split with the cinemas, like you're gonna get a Hollywood split, and typically the split is 60-40, 60 to the cinema, 40 to you. So no matter which cinema you go to, I mean, you might get lucky and get 50-50 depending on your negotiating skills, but generally it's not in your favor. And then by the third or fourth week, it slides to 35 to you and it just stays there. And so the cinema gets the larger end and you kind of look. So it's really like part of the problem is big movies in Hollywood make their money back in America, and then the world, the global, is just kind of like icing, right? So we as independent filmmakers cannot compete and can't compete with the marketing. It's a huge problem. And
Yeah.
hopefully the platforms maybe democratize it a little bit, whether it's Amazon or Netflix or Apple or
Right.
all these different things. But it's a big, big, big problem. So ideally, I think like maybe a good thing that could possibly happen, like a solution could be like whichever film board or head of film could have a conversation with cinemas and say, well, hey, what, when there's a local product, maybe it have some form of, they get a better deal, it's 50-50
Yeah.
split,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the price is a little lower. But the thing is, it's private businesses, so they could just be like, nah, we don't like that idea. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah. And that the government can't regulate private business in that
yeah,
way.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, but I just think we should be happy that they're willing to play the local films. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah, and I mean it's great that you guys have, because in St. Vincent we do have a cinema, but it's not in the best shape.
Right. So yeah.
So when you go to Movie Town in Trinidad, you're just like, and it's so funny because when I go to Trinidad, I love Trinidad, and my grandfather is Trinidadian,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
I feel really at home there. Anyway, and when I go and I go to places like Napa, and I'm like, whoa, like
Yeah, we're
imagine
still lucky. And
St.
then
Vincent
we
had
taking it for
something like this, and everybody's complaining about it.
yeah,
And of course, because it's all it's subjective, right? Like where you are, you always see the issues and the things that need improving, and that's because we want to grow, but you
I
know
went to India and I swear I didn't complain for like 3 years after going to India. Because like I was like, and one of the main things was I ended up in a traffic jam for like 6 hours.
yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. And just little things like that. I was like, yeah, we trying to have it nice, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, there's one more question. Could you ask what resources you recommend for young emerging or Caribbean filmmakers, or who they should follow for inspiration?
I don't know, it's tough, but and you see how Aiko said she bounced me up in London, bounced me up in South by Southwest. I have been going to these spots. I went and live in LA. Not everybody could do this, but I went and live in LA for 6 months. Well, kind of like a 3 months and a 3 months, that type of stuff, or live in different places. I've been to Cannes Film Festival. I've went and gotten a pass and went to the European film market. I went and like, walked in there and told people, oh, I'm a Caribbean distributor looking for content, and had a bunch of meetings, even though I really wasn't. Meaning like I wanted to learn and talk to these people and see how their brain moving, what they think about, like, and really understand the business side and see what's going on in the world of filmmaking and just try to, get a full picture on it. So I think you just have to be like an information seeker. Like I try to watch panels and
Yeah.
because who is hard in the Caribbean has really reached so far and then also been able to give the access back, because this industry, people lock up the information. It's like lock and key. How do you get it and all that? But at the end of the day, what I've realized is really about is having the audacity to just keep going and not stopping and applying for things and trying to turn the nose into yes and just like
Yeah.
following your path. And like with everything you do, you just start to understand how it works. And you're like, oh, okay, that's how that's work. And you just keep leveling up, But the tough part about it is every time you reach a new level, it's like you have to be 10 times better to get to the next level. And then, so that's like 20 times better and then 30 times better because now you're raising your own bar. So all of that is part of like that process. And you just have to forget about what people say because people really understand how hard it is and they don't make films and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everybody assume because I made Green Days, but if I could just go make a next movie. Like I'm making a next movie involve a couple $1 million or not. It could be something simpler. But I just saying that it's not that easy. But at the same time, you have to find that guidance. So for me, just speaking personally, I have friends. Like one of my good friends is Ty Hodges, who lives in LA, and Gianfranco. And I have like people who I tap into and they making movies in Hollywood or different spaces. And I'd be like, yo, this is what I'm trying to do. And I connect and have conversations. And you have to kind of find your tribe in filmmaking and people who support you that you're comfortable with. And if you ever like, so like those two people I just mentioned, Ty and Gian, they got my film equipment to Trinidad. And because of that, they got close and they ended up making a movie together. Because I was messaging Jay and I was like, yo, I had to get this gear to Trinidad and would you fly it in? And then he was like, yeah, but how am I going to collect it from Panavision? I messaged Ty if you could get a U-Haul and help Jian. And then like just saying that. So like you
Yeah,
kind of have to build a tribe of people that have your back and then they help you and it's vice versa now.
yeah.
So it's a tough question because it's hard to get information, but it's really like you just have to make movies and learn, and then once you produce something good or you become and you're talented, like people will gravitate to you, and then you kind of have that access now. So,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
would just say, and like lastly in that question, that I had a lot of mentors. So like the cinematographer on the Cool Boys was Franklin Sejus, right? He taught at Carrimac in Jamaica. He passed away now. But he filmed Harder They Come with Perry Hensel. So I made that decision because I wanted to learn from him, who I viewed as like one of the forefathers of Caribbean cinema. So I wanted to be close to that energy and learn from him. So he came to Trinidad and stay in my house and we talk every night and all that. And several times after I went to Jamaica and visit him, so it's about finding these kind of mentors. And luckily in my life, I've had a lot of mentors that impart knowledge. So when I look at myself, and that's why I try to give back information, and I like lecturing in UE right now, teaching marketing and distribution and different things. But it's like, I just look at it like, yo, so much information has been given to me. I try to give it back. Oh, and just simply like when I was in London, I did a master's in international film business. It was a 1 year. And I learned so much from that now. So now that I'm figuring out how that whole system does work anyways, because I felt like when we make Green Days, we didn't take a traditional financing route. And now I was like, yo, I need to go and learn some of this. And part of that learning process, I could decide to just be a director, but I'm like, no, I want to own my films. So therefore, the only way to own my films is I can't sit back and let other people fund it and other producers, because then they'll just hire me as a director, even though it's my movie. So I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I want to have my own film label. So it's looking at it like that. How do we become sustainable filmmakers where we could be making a movie a year? And that's the plan. Ultimately, I don't think this life is for everybody. So if you really feel like you can live without it, I tell people maybe don't bother, because it's fun and thing, but then it's become like real work and
Yeah,
pain. And yeah.
yeah, it's
And
real graft, like you said.
you can see the people in the industry, like how I run into you and you always doing something in film, or I can see it, everybody. So I already know in 20 years all these people I know going to be something, and it's not like they're going to be like, no, I think I'm going to be a banker or whatever it is, what I mean? Like I know everybody in film going to be, so it's part of your network, and that's always about the networking.
Yeah, we're hooked in for better or worse.
Yeah, exactly.
For better
So I
or
know like
worse.
next year when this film, hopefully Corona finish and the film festival happening in real life, I'm like, yo, I come in, yes, because I didn't get to come last year.
Yeah, you must come. It's so much
Yeah.
fun. And actually that's a good kind of segue into like as we kind of wrap up here. Because we would love to have you. And this year, our audience has sort of grown in all these ways, and we have a lot of people who are like, yeah, we want to come to the festival, and that's really exciting for St. Vincent as well, to have new people coming in, engaging with the local people over this incredible craft, right? Over these stories that really formulate our identity, which is like at the heart of it, kind of what keeps us going and you going as well in a lot of senses, like that thing that that motivation that you need to push through to keep leveling up. You know, I mean, I can speak personally because I just really believe that these stories need to be told, you know, and deserve to be told. And I think we have a lot to contribute. So yeah, Michael, I just want to thank you so much for being here with us, and
It's been fun.
you know, being here like on our final nights. Like we do have one workshop tomorrow.
Okay.
Because we launched a what we're calling the Hairouna Film Lab. So we
Okay.
basically got some sponsorship through our sponsor Soho House in
Nice.
London.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we worked with them to develop. They have something called the Script House,
Oh,
which is a script competition, and we worked with them to develop one for Vincentia National. So it's the first time that's ever anything like that's been offered to Vincentia National. So we're really proud about that, and you know they get like mentorship and 10 grand at the end to put it toward their film. So
yeah.
you know we're trying a little thing,
Yeah, yeah,
and
no,
you
that
know,
sounds.
bit by bit.
That's all. That's what it is, though. That's not even a little thing. That's what it's all about. Because people, if you don't know this game, and I was just saying the word game for lack of, but is when you win something like that, is that momentum. You go, oh, I just won this Soho House pitch, and then you go to the next thing, and then you build this pyramid almost of. I don't want to say pyramid because I might be taken the wrong way. This foundation that grows into actually making a movie.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
But yeah, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you and
no
to
problem. But
close this
Aiko,
out like
I want to I'll just also say I'm proud of you. I think it's amazing what you're doing. We met so long ago in Caribbean Tales Film Festival, and it's just amazing to see what you're doing and to run into you all the time. But also, the film festival looks amazing, and I think like I'm a real proud. I always like I love to be involved in film festivals because I see the value and the benefits. So keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully I can be a part in years to come to continue being a part of Hariuna, probably in front
Haruna. Yeah.
film festival. So
Yeah,
thanks for
yeah.
having me.
Yeah, of
And
course. Again, like, and likewise, you know, I've really seen your work grow over the years and see everything that you're doing. And, you know, it's great to connect like this. And I just want to give a shout out to the team, Beth, Olivia, and Karen, and everybody else that's been, you know, behind the scenes helping out in all these little ways. Nadia Huggins, you know, so it's a real like community effort, and we're so happy to have you here, and thank you for this evening. It was really great.
awesome, thank you.
Yeah, keep in touch and take care.
Will do.
Bye.
Bye.